Hey, I'm Alex. This is Code Along with Alex, and today we're going to run a stateless application using a deployment with Kubernetes. So let's just get right into it. So we're going to follow the tutorial that's linked in the video description, but we're going to do a little bit of reading before jumping right into the code. So the objectives for today are to create an Nginx deployment, use kubectl to list information about the deployment, and then update the deployment. So before you begin, you will need a Kubernetes cluster and the kubectl command line tool configured to communicate with that cluster. I'm using the Killer Coda learning environment, and I recommend that as a quick and easy way to get started learning Kubernetes. So let's just get into it. Let's verify that kubectl is configured. I'm going to check the version. Cool. We're getting a deprecated notice, but that's fine. All right. So to start, we're going to create and explore an Nginx deployment. And so we can run an application by creating a Kubernetes deployment object and describe a deployment in YAML. YAML for the win. So for example, the YAML file that I'm going to show in a moment describes a deployment that runs Nginx 1.14.2 Docker image. So if we toggle back to the documents, you can see the YAML in question. Name Nginx deployment. Some parameters. This one will have 2 pods matching the template. And then just the image, the Nginx 1.14.2 and container port 80. Nothing too wild here. So if we toggle back to our Killer Coda, I'm going to clear this just to make it a little cleaner. And we're actually going to create a deployment based on that YAML. So the good people at Kubernetes, or the documentation team, have stored the contents of that YAML file at a URL for us to simplify this process. So instead of manually pasting that YAML content into a file, we can just download a remote file and run kubectl apply at the same time. So I'm going to do kubectl apply, do the F flag, and then I'm going to paste in this URL so I don't introduce any typos. But you can see this is just a URL. Feel free to visit it at your leisure. And so we've created a deployment, and it's following the naming convention described in our app, or in our YAML, namely Nginx-deployment. Cool. So now that we've created this deployment, let's actually display some information about it. And this will, you guessed it, use kubectl. It's the main kind of thing we're using today. And so we're going to pass the describe method, and we want to describe a deployment, and specifically the Nginx deployment. So you can see we're getting some information. Got the name, the namespace, creation time. No labels were added, just some annotations, how many replicas we declared, and really just some of the information that we defined in that YAML. It's just displaying this to our terminal output. So we can also list the pods created by this deployment using kubectl. So if we clear this, we can do kubectl, get pods, and then -l. And so we're going to pass a specific app, so we're not getting all the pods in case you have multiple pods in your cluster, with your configured kubectl. So we're specifically filtering for the Nginx app. So you can see we have 2 pods. And this would make sense because this is what we declared in our YAML. Very cool. So let's describe information about one of these specific pods. So to do that, again, kubectl, describe pod, but then I want to pass the name of one of these pods. So I'm going to copy that value using Control-Shift-C. That's annoying, but it's a web-based terminal, so that happens. And now you can see we've output information specifically. Ooh, that's freaking out a little bit. About our. Let me clear this. It's kind of tripping out a little bit. There we go. It's a little easier to see. So the name of that specific pod, namespace, kind of a lot of the same information that was declared previously, but also more of the nitty gritty, like IP addresses, same port, but image, the same image we declared in our YAML. So yeah, it's all kind of just interconnected. Nothing too crazy, but you're able to view information about your specific pods. So let me clear this just to make things a little neater. Now we're going to move on to updating our deployment, because this is a common practice. Like you're going to deploy stuff, but it's not going to remain stagnant in perpetuity. Like you will need to change things. And so knowing how to update your deployment is useful. And so you can update your deployments by applying a new YAML file. So this YAML file specifies that the deployment should be updated to Nginx 1.16.1. So that's in the context of our application where we previously or currently are at Nginx 1.14.1, but we're going to update our version. And I guess if you zoom out a little bit, this is where using a tool like GitHub or just any kind of source control versioning system is super powerful, because you can have multiple versions of YAMLs and really track the changes you're making and I guess minimize the unknown bugs and errors that you're introducing into your infrastructure. So let me toggle back to the documentation. So this YAML looks very similar to the YAML we had inspected previously, except you can notice that we're declaring the Nginx 1.16.1 image instead of the Nginx 1.14.1 image. So I'm going to aggressively scroll, or not aggressive, let's leisurely scroll. But you can see 1.14.2, excuse me. Okay, so we're updating the version from 1.14.2 to 1.16.1. Same ports, everything else is the same. So let's toggle back to our killer coda, and we're going to do a very similar procedure to what we did when we applied the initial YAML. We're just going to run kubectl apply, and the kind people of the Kubernetes doc team or docs team created another YAML for us to download from a remote path, so I don't have to worry about tweaking any local YAML, but just kind of strategies will vary whether you're specifying a remote YAML or you have version controlled or source controlled YAML on your local machine. It kind of just depends, but for the sake of this exercise, having remote files is super convenient and minimizes user error. So I'm going to copy paste that URL, and we're going to apply the changes to our Nginx deployment. So let's watch the deployment create pods with new names and delete the old pods. So we'll call kubectl get pods -l and then filter for Nginx app name. And so you can see new pods were created within the last 20-30 seconds. So those were after this YAML update. So if we want to actually inspect our deployment, let's again run kubectl describe deployment nginx deployment. And then let's you can see the big difference is now we are pointing to the nginx 1.16.1 image. How many times can I say nginx today? Is that even how you pronounce it? Nginx? Nginx sounds cleaner. I don't know. I mean, how nerdy can I get? I'm trying to have an opinion on what sounds cooler, how to pronounce like nginx or nginx. Oh well. Okay, but that was nice. We got to kind of see how we updated deployment using YAML, and we're able to verify that the changes that we made, or the expected changes, actually occurred. So now we're going to move on and scale our application by increasing the replica count. And so we're going to do some more YAML tinkering, because that's how things are done in Kubernetes land. But you can increase the number of pods in your deployment by applying a new YAML file. So this file will set the replicas to 4 and specify that the deployment should have 4 pods. So I'm going to toggle back to the documentation very briefly, and you can see that now the YAML has been updated with the current 1.16.1 image, but then we've also modified the replicas count to be 4. So previously this was set to 2. I'm going to scroll up so we can inspect this. On the initial update, it was set to 2, and on the when our first, I guess, initial deployment and then the ensuing update, they both had a replica count of 2. But now we're going to update that. And so if you guessed that we're going to download a remote YAML file like before, you are right. Let's run another kubectl apply command. So I'm going to clear our terminal just to make it a little cleaner, less noise. Kubectl apply -f, and then let me copy paste that link. And then let's just press enter. And you can see the deployment was configured. It's super speedy. I dig it. Let's verify that the deployment has 4 pods. So kubectl get pods -l app equals nginx. So previously we had seen 2 pods whenever we ran this command. We expect 4. Hopefully we get 4. We got 4. Awesome. Okay, and you can see that 2 of the pods are a little older than the other 2, which is cool. So we didn't recreate all the pods. We just dynamically scaled. So it's not like we went from 2 to 0 to 4. We went from 2 to 4. So that's cool. So finally, like all good things, this session must come to an end. But instead of just kind of running away and dumping this, which we could, because Killer Coda will clean everything up, imagining you're working in a situation where you don't have automated cleanup scripts for your cluster, you might actually want to delete your deployment. And so to free up resources for other deployments or for other users in your system. And so to be good wardens on our hypothetical system, or good users in this shared resource setting, let's delete our deployment. So to do that, we'll run kubectl delete deployment nginx deployment. And I guess one less, it's not even necessarily to be, I mean, it's always good to be nice and like not hog resources, but you could be spending money and wasting money when you shouldn't be. And that's important. And so deleting resources when they're not being used anymore is just good housekeeping. So let's just delete our deployment. And so now if we wanted to list our deployments again, let us describe, actually, kubectl describe deployment nginx deployment. What do we see? No deployment found. Awesome. So it really was deleted. Okay. Awesome. That's basically it for today. I really appreciate your company. It was a lot of fun. Doing a little brief foray into deployments on Kubernetes. I'm Alex. This has been Code Along with Alex, and I hope to see you next time. Have a great day.